Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Journal with Tanishq, and today I'm here with another video in which I'm going to be sharing 5 tips and tricks for any watercolor beginner out there. Well, without any further ado, let's get into the video. Well, here's the tip number 1. Activate the watercolors before use. Are you just tired of this unsaturated, dried and even muddy watercolors despite how many times you layer and use the right consistency of water? Then here's a trick for you. Just add 2 to 3 drops of water, wait for a minute, and then use the watercolor cakes as normal you use every time. But as you add the watercolor on the watercolor paper, you'll observe a lot of difference in the color saturation. This is because the watercolor cakes have activated and gives a lot much saturation than before, as you can see in the comparison. I've even tested it out with the other colors so that you guys can confirm it that it's not just that color that is both dull and bright, so you can observe a lot of color saturation difference. Here's the light purple and here's the trick that I've told you. Moving on to tip number 2, which is use watercolor papers. Well, most watercolor beginners, including me, first start off while just using a normal paper, which we think is quite normal because in the starting it seems all normal. But as you see the difference with the watercolor paper, which I'll show you later, you'll observe a lot of difference in the saturation. Like here is the watercolor paper, and I just used the same amount of water as I used on the normal paper. You can observe that there's a lot of difference in the saturation. I'm able to layer. The paper is not even getting buckled up, and it is really good for layering effects. It is not buckling up. So I'll show you a comparison now between the watercolor paper and the normal paper. You can see a lot of difference in the saturation. The normal paper has become really filthy, has buckled up, and is not even saturated enough. Whereas the watercolor paper gives a lot of saturation, is not buckled up as much as the normal paper, and that's a clear difference between both of them. Moving forward to the tip number 3, which is wet the paper before starting. Well, most of you guys as of watercolor beginners don't tend to wet the paper before you start. Watercolor is usually watercolor, which is using water to just activate the colors. Therefore, it is really important for you, especially while making gradients, to wet the paper before starting. Here I've demonstrated how your painting usually turns out when you are not using water before starting your watercolor painting. It just dries up, it even spoils the brush sometimes, and you can observe a clear difference between both of them. It's even saturated, but the other paper, which is just without water, isn't saturated enough. Here's the tip number 4. Add tape on all the sides of the watercolor paper just before beginning your painting. Well, this trick can be used not only for getting good borders, but also has a really important reason behind it. Well, recently I just showed you a painting of just adding blue paint on the paper. Even the watercolor paper buckles up, especially when you do not add the tape. If you add the tape, it buckles up much less than before. I'll even show you a difference between both of them. It allows you to just keep the paper intact and also makes sure that the paper doesn't buckle up. And also, at last, gives a really good white border, which can be really good, especially if you're going for that look. So you can just add tape on all the 4 corners. It will not, the paper doesn't buckle up a lot much, and also gives you a really good white border around your painting. And that is it for the tip number 4. Moving on to the tip number 5, which is use the right amount of water. Well, using the right amount of water is really important because especially when you're doing gradients, if you use less amount of water, then it leads to a really dry effect like I showed you before. And also if you use a large amount of water, then it leads to a cauliflower effect. So right here I've used the right amount of water to just get that even gradient. Also, if you want in a lot much detail about the watercolor gradient formation and how to use the right amount of water, then I've also made a video separately alone on that topic. So I'll leave a link in the description box and in the iCard options so that you guys can check it out. Here's the effect without using the right amount of water. That is it for today, guys. I hope you really found these tips and tricks helpful for your watercolor painting, and if you did, then make sure to tell me in the comment section which tip was the most helpful to you guys. And also, if you like the tips, then make sure to like the video down below and also subscribe to my channel.